Hello. Welcome to the first of the library's three-part 17th annual Alan and Nathalie Voorhees Lecture on the History of Cartography. My name is Scott Dodson. I'm the Executive Director of the Library of Virginia Foundation. Thank you to everybody who joined us this evening and to those that have stuck with us when we had to postpone the original in-person scheduled meeting for last spring. So we hope that you were able to join us tonight since we weren't able to meet then. I would also like to recognize the Fry-Jefferson Map Society for its support in hosting tonight's event. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. The first is at the end of the program today, Dr. Tise will answer your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box during the program, and we will do our best to gather them for the end of the program. So we're not going to have any hand raising in the middle of the presentation. It'll all happen at the end. If any of you would like to support the library today or in the future, or join the Fry-Jefferson Map Society, we're going to put a link in the chat bar that you can click on, and that'll take you to the foundation's donation page, and all of your support would go to supporting the library. With that, Dr. Larry Tise is a native of North Carolina and has served as Director of North Carolina's Division of Archives and History, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania's Historical and Museum Commission, the Executive Director of the Benjamin Franklin National Memorial. Since 1997, he has been a private practice historian in Philadelphia and the Wilbur and Orville Distinguished Professor of History at East Carolina University. With undergraduate and divinity degrees from Duke University, he received his PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who just suspended class this week. His previous books have focused on race and slavery in the United States, Benjamin Franklin, the Wright brothers, and the history of his native state. His research and hand-colored DeBry engravings has informed his current book project, The Meaning of Color in America. He's been an associate of the McNeil Center at the University of Pennsylvania and was a faculty fellow at NASA Langley Research Center. His research on race and color have been facilitated fellowships from the Ford Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the John Carter Brown Library. Tonight's presentation will focus on DeBry's counterplate engravings, lavishly illustrated exploration narratives that instantly became iconic images, instructing even our current concept of Native Americans. His folio-sized books invited Europe's artists to use their imagination in applying the colors on maps. All right, that was a long time for me, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Tise and enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's wonderful to be with you in this lecture tonight. This is a sort of a strange way to do it because most of the times I like to see the eyes and the faces of the people I talk with, but I guess you will only be able to see my face tonight. But I encourage you to ask questions. The questions that have come in already for this session have been really fascinating questions. So please feel free to ask questions. The title that you see on the screen turned out to be a lecture or talk directed toward your audience specifically. I've been talking about my new book, the Theodore DeBry America, and this huge, beautiful, wonderful book published by Taschen for about a year now. But every time I'm asked to speak, there are certain things that come to mind that occurred as I was preparing for this session. So I'm going to jump right in, if my computer will forward to the next screen. We're going to start out with somebody known to everybody in Virginia, of course, and in America and around the world, Thomas Jefferson. I think most people know that Jefferson spent more money on books and wine than practically anybody in colonial America. And It just so happened that in January 1789, one of the book dealers that he bought books from frequently, a guy named Pieter van Dam, who's located in Amsterdam, notified Jefferson that he had found an auction which offered some of the books that Jefferson had been requesting for quite a while. And in this auction was going to be the sale of a set of Theodore DeBry's Grand Voyages, which actually included all of the volumes, more than the 9 volumes that are included in my book. It actually included the additional volumes that were published after 1602, but those volumes were published by different people from the people who did the first 9 volumes. But anyway, he said, I can bid for you to get this set of books, and he pointed out that it included a copy of Thomas Harriot's book on Virginia, which is something that Jefferson had been wanting to get for quite a while. So in March 1789, Van Dam informed Jefferson that he had the winning bid for a topmost work containing all the information on America and ornated with very beautiful engravings, a work of exceptional rarity and original. And that made Jefferson very happy. Jefferson, who spent very heavily on books, paid a great deal of money in Dutch guilders at the time to get this set of books. The books were added to Jefferson's library. They were part of the collection of books sold to the Library of Congress, of course, and unfortunately they burned. So we don't have Jefferson's set of books to consult today. Interestingly, a little bit later, so the point of that was Jefferson and lots of other people of means wanted to have this set of books. Interestingly, a few years later, in 1820, a North Carolina man, he actually was from Scotland, but he'd been in North Carolina for many years, was a lawyer in North Carolina. And don't worry if you haven't heard of Peter Brown, because nobody in North Carolina has heard of Peter Brown either. But you may be familiar with the first real map from surveys of North Carolina, which was printed in, well, it was actually initiated in 1796, but not published until 1808. But Peter Brown was one of the sponsors of that book. And he was very wealthy. He had a huge Scottish inheritance, but he also was a wealthy lawyer in North Carolina. And he was one of those people who wanted to build canals in North Carolina. And so he took a 3-year leave of absence from North Carolina to go back to Scotland, and from 1818 to 1821. And during that time, he served as the agent of North Carolina. And so just when Virginia was building canals and North Carolina wanted to build canals, Peter Brown showed up at the House of Commons and spoke to the clerk at table of the House of Commons. That's a term I didn't know until I started working on this, to send a request to the 3rd Earl of Egremont. It was an urgent request for a copy of the colored print of Thomas Harriot's map of the precise spot about which his government had reason for anxious research. Well, the reason for anxious research was that North Carolina was proposing to blast out the Outer Banks of North Carolina and build a canal right out into the ocean. And people in North Carolina at that time who had not seen, they didn't think to go up and check with Jefferson, with Jefferson's books. So they went the other way and went to London and asked to see the colored print. The colored print was very important. The colored print that was owned by the Earl of Egremont. And so lo and behold, I was able to figure out which one he was looking for. This is the hand-colored map that that Peter Brown and the people who wanted to build canals in North Carolina were looking for. It happens to be the first map, or actually the second map, in Harriet's book. What's interesting about this map is that it shows, you see the grainy area, if I can get my pointer to work, here, which is at the mouth of the Albemarle Sound, and here between the various segments of what's now called the Outer Banks. At that time, they were called the Sand Barrier. The Outer Banks is a 20th century term. But in any case, this map encouraged the canal builders in North Carolina to think big, and so they hoped that they would be able to reopen the Roanoke River, which dumped into the Albemarle Sound, and the Chowan River, and get it back to flowing the way it was supposed to, and it would flow through an opening into the Atlantic Ocean. Well, we know that that didn't work too well, because North Carolinians blamed another Virginian for messing up the water system in North Carolina, and of course that was George Washington, who built the Dismal Swamp Canal and also built drainage ditches all through the Dismal Swamp, so that land in northeastern North Carolina could be used for agriculture. So the point of this is that people wanted to find these books for research purposes, and people who were wealthy wanted to collect these books. And indeed, in the 19th century, there were book dealers in the United States and all over Europe who firmly believed, because they wanted to sell books, that no gentleman could have a proper library without having a copy of Theodore DeBry's Grand Voyages, which was the first 6 to 9 volumes of Theodore DeBry's America, which is what's included in my new book. So I thought we would talk a little bit about this era of hand-colored maps and books and prints, because hand coloring, well, actually engraving didn't really come into play until about the time that Sir Walter Raleigh and Thomas Harriot and John White were coming to the coast of North Carolina. And so you had this coming together at one moment of doing copperplate engravings and also hand coloring, because as the interest in doing illuminated hand copied books went out of fashion, all of a sudden there were all of these copperplate engravings that came into place, and so a lot of those people who used to hand color manuscript books suddenly tried to get work hand coloring these new printed books. So by just thinking about hand colored materials from this period of time, we actually can pretty much do a trip from England to the coast of Virginia, North Carolina. At the time, this map was a map, a series of maps that went along with Sir Francis Drake's terrible trip around the Atlantic and the Caribbean area in 1586, in which he proceeded to destroy Spanish towns all around the Caribbean area. And this map was drawn by Baptiste Boisio, who was a friend of John White's, and he was such a friend of John White's that he borrowed some of John White's drawings of his fish and reproduced John White's drawings of fish. They're a little different from the way they looked in John White's drawings, but he included these fish, reptiles, iguanas, alligators on his maps before 1590, when the Harriet book was published with engravings. This is a little closer look of the Atlantic Ocean, and you may recall that at that time, whether you were leaving from France or Spain or Germany or England, the way to get to North America was to go south off the coast of Africa and then get the trade winds to make a straight shot across the Atlantic, and you ended up in Puerto Rico, the rich door to the West Indies. And on this particular trip in 1586, of course, Drake attacked all of these places, and just before he ended up visiting Virginia to take the people who were on the White, Harriet, Ralph Lane expedition in 1585, 1586 back to England. He had just destroyed San Augusta. I mean, what is the city in Florida? I'm trying to say, you know. But anyway, he did that, and we can follow this. The trip that Lord Grenville took to bring the 1585-86 expedition to Virginia. They left in April from England, and they went to Puerto Rico, as on all the other trips. And on the trip, they lost their pinnace. And this is a John Wright drawing. They lost a pinnace, and so they stopped in Puerto Rico while they were waiting for the other 6 ships to arrive to build a new pinnace. And this pinnace came in handy because they were able to use it on the coast of North Carolina. They started this pinnace, which is a big boat. It's a boat that's big enough to cross the Atlantic Ocean, on 13 May, and they finished it in 10 days. That's pretty amazing. And you can see the construction area as they built the pinnace. Once the pinnace was finished, they moved on. They went to another part of Puerto Rico where there was a salt mine, and they loaded up salt to go to Virginia. They also bought cattle, they bought food, they bought supplies from the Spaniards. And it's not that the Spaniards, the official Spaniards, wanted to do business with the English, but there were plenty of shall we call them pirates, who operated outside of the main system, who provided plenty of supplies for the people who were going on to Virginia. On July 3rd, they arrived at Wocacan, and on July the 11th, Grenville took the new pinnace to the mainland with Thomas Harriot, John White, and others on board. And it's interesting. This is this same map again, but with different coloring, and it shows their small boat going through the inlets, outlets of the Outer Banks, and headed toward Roanoke Island. But actually, one of the things about color, which I might as well mention right now, is that if you look at this little boat up close in color, what I see is basically Lord Grenville maybe holding a cross headed over to Roanoke Island, because they were supposedly going to try to get all of the Indians to become Christians. And I see down here either John White or Thomas Harriot scribbling on a pad, and this may be Thomas Harriot doing rectangles, trying to figure out the angles going into the Outer Banks. And it's hard to tell what this person is doing, but clearly this is colored to show us a person. But if we look at that more closely, which we'll do in a couple of minutes, I'll show you who those people really are. Interestingly, between July 11th and 18th, Grenville, Harriet, and White visited all of the places that are included in the White watercolors of the coast, the Carolina coast. And it included all of the watercolors that were eventually engraved for Harriet's book. Now, the great historian David Quinn, who did the Roanoke Voyages, believed that John White remained throughout the year that this group was on the coast of North Carolina. I don't think he did. I think he probably left with Grenville in August to go back to England, because there are no drawings done by John White that could conceivably have been done after this month-long period of time. And so when we look at the John White drawings and thereby the engravings that are in Harriet's book, they really depict just about a week of activity in North Carolina. The only drawings that may not have been done during that week are the drawings of Wingina, the local chieftain, and Wingina's wife. But they were with Wingina and Wingina's wife this whole period of time, so they easily could have done them as well. So on this trip, they went over to Secota, and they went to Aquascogot, and they also went to Pomiac. And this is a hand-colored version, and these two images are from the Mariners Museum's wonderful hand-colored Latin version of the Harriet DeBry book. So they're beautiful, wonderful, but they're John White drawings behind these. We have a supposed image of Thomas Harriot, who's on the left here. We don't have an image of John White. We don't know what John White looked like. So I just stuck in, one of the images that John White drew when he was on this 7-day expedition. But these two made two unbelievable contributions to our knowledge and to our understanding and to how we see the world today, or how we see this period of time in our world today. First of all, they created a collaboration to produce this wonderful map of Virginia and North Carolina. And it's very interesting, but they got it right. The barrier islands shown on the coast of what is now North Carolina is not too far off from a good representation. You couldn't just sit down and draw this. There had to be a survey to accomplish this. John White did not do the survey. The survey was done by Thomas Harriot and his crews who went up and down the barrier islands, triangulating and making this map. But John White definitely drew the map, because Thomas Harriot did not have an artistic bone in his body. The other thing that they contributed together was the creation of this fabulous, fabulous book. If you read about Thomas Harriot, you will find that his brief and true report of the Newfound Land of Virginia is, if it's mentioned at all, it's mentioned as a little pamphlet that Thomas Harriot wrote up in a great rush. And he did write it in a great rush in 1588. However, then that book was put into this incredible book, which defined the way we see Indians in America from then until today. John White, of course, did the drawings, but the watercolors. But from the time John White completed the watercolors and they were turned over to either Sir Walter Raleigh or Richard Hakluyt, there is no evidence, or not even any indirect evidence that John White had anything to do with the creation of the engravings that appeared in the Harriet book. The power of color. And this is what is so overwhelming to me. If you bought a copy of the Thomas Harriot's book, the 1590 book, which was published by Theodore DeBry, this is what you would see. You would see a black and white image, and this image is from a very good uncolored copy that is at the East Carolina Joyner Library, which fortunately I helped to find and purchase for East Carolina several years ago, which is what got me onto this jag of studying these things. But if you put a hand-colored map beside of it, the hand colorist has taken something that is almost difficult to discern and has used his, or in many cases her, skills. We know that a lot of maps were colored by women to help you interpret what you are looking at. And depending upon the skill and the knowledge of the hand colorist, and the hand colorist did not see John White's drawings or anything in color. So the hand colorist was working basically using his own instincts or experience in hand coloring maps, because in this period of time, many maps were also hand colored. This version that you see here is a German hand colored version, and I want to mention to you that German hand colored versions are dark. They're dark for one reason or another, but every German hand colored version I have seen have this similar dark hue to them. But if you put the German next to a French edition, you get a completely different take on what the water looks like, on what the landscape looks like, on the in one you see grasses highlighted and but not in the other. The interpretation of the little boat going across the sound is different. And wow, put the French version beside of this great Latin edition that's at the Mariners Museum, and it's like turning on lights. And once again, you have a different kind of interpretation, which is extremely helpful. You see the colors surrounding the land masses, which was a tool used by map colorists to help define areas, and come back to that a little bit later, but also to define borders. So now we come back to the little boat going in, and remember who I said these people are, this is Grenville, and this is White, and this is Harriet, and so on. Well, if you come over and look at the, that's not very clear to me right now for some reason, but this guy who I thought might be White making a sketch is actually a guy with an oar. And this guy who I thought might be doing triangulations or something, he's got the rudder. And this guy is not a guy at all. This guy is just furled up sail. So hand colorists sometimes don't know exactly what they're doing, and so they can lead you astray. But mainly hand colorists are extremely helpful in helping you to understand. A couple of examples. This is a very famous engraving. Their manner of fishing in Virginia, and this is the black and white East Carolina copy. You put the German version beside it, and once you start seeing things, and I think it's wonderful how they start coloring these critters, and some of these critters were not in the, actually very few of these critters were in the John Wright drawing. So the engraver decided to take some of the critters that were in John White's drawings and stick them into to the water here. Let's see. Okay. Once again, the German on the left, the Latin on the right. And the same thing happens with these land masses. This is the other map that is in the Harriet book. And it's confusing to some people because it shows we're usually figuring out that north is up this way, but actually here, north is over in this direction. So you're coming from east to west, approaching the Carolina coast and the Chesapeake Sound. And you can turn it around just by circulating the map, and it makes sense when you turn it the other way. But wow, you put color in there, and all of a sudden you have boundaries, you have hills and mountains, and you have coats of arms, and you have all kinds of wonderful information. You even have this little person on the edge here next to the scale of the map who comes to life and is not just a little scratch mark on the page. This is my favorite of all of the engravings. In fact, whenever I see a hand-colored version of the Harriet DeBry book, this is the first image I go to, because hand colorists became extremely creative with this image of the man and the woman. They're sitting at meat, and hand colorists had to make decisions about what's the color of their skin, his and hers, what color of hair do they have, what color eyes do they have, what's the color of the jewelry, what's the color of this stuff, this mush, what's the color of the corn, the fish, and this is not a squid, this is a tobacco pouch. So how do we go about coloring those? What is hand colorist going to do? Wow. All right, here's the German version, and clearly the hand colorist thought this was an animal and not a pouch, and knew that was a fish. And in the text, it said that the corn was red, blue, and white. And so the colorist says, oh, it must be in long rows. And so we have rows of colored corn. And then this, it's not clear what this is, but anyway, it became mush. She's got a beautiful blue dress on. These are all animal skins, of course. And he's got dark, whoops, let's don't end it now. He's definitely looking at her and saying, she's a beauty. And she's looking at us saying, come on, guys, because she's got blonde hair, she's got red lips, she has lipstick on. So the colorist here had a ball. Oh, and the interesting feather up there too. This is the German version. And this is the French version. And the French versions are, as you can tell, more flamboyant. She must have been around in the 1960s to get this pink red hair. Or maybe she could be walking down the streets today. And this guy had red hair because in the text it said the Indians sometimes used mud or dirt to go in their hair, but not usually when they're sitting down to dinner. And oops, look at the corn. They said it was red, white, and blue. And so anyway, it is red, white, and blue, and it's in circles. So then the town of Sakota is another very popular image for hand colors. And so you see this black and white image, and it's really it all sort of mushes together in the engraving, although the engraver was obviously a fabulous engraver. And wow, the hand colorist tells us what is going on. And there are mistakes in here, but performed by the hand colorist, but nevertheless, it helps us to figure out that this is a walkway, this is full-grown corn, this is partially grown corn, and these are little corn things coming up, and these are pumpkins. They stuck in some tobacco over here. I don't think John White had tobacco in mind when he did this. I'm not sure. But in any case, it's a really beautiful rendering of an activity. So John White drew this image. This is the engraving, not John White's image. But then he took apart the pieces that are in here because the man and woman sitting at meat are down here, and the people cooking are up here. And so almost everybody who's in the John White drawings is in this image in detail. This is a French rendering, again, using French ideas. Suggest to you that you can always tell a difference between French and German, or even German and Latin, because of the color of the smoke. In German and many Latin editions, the smoke is completely black. In French and English versions, you can actually see the flame, and you can see more white smoke than dark smoke. How did I get into this? I was searching for and we're going to run out of time, searching for the perfect Harriet DeBry, and there are lots of ideas about what is a perfect Harriet DeBry. But I started out with this, which is the repackaged East Carolina volume of Harriet. It was not repackaged by East Carolina. It was repackaged by a book collector in the 19th century. And this is the book I ended up with. But in getting from one place to another, I studied, what is a perfect uncolored book. And to get a perfect one, you've got to get pages that are messy. If they're trimmed, it's no good. You got to get pages that are dirty. You have to measure. You have to look for watermarks. You have to look for chain marks. You have to look for blemishes like wormholes. I did a lot of those and did measurements and figured out a comparison of size, quality of Harriet DeBry volumes all over. Then I encountered color when I was looking for the black and white versions and comparing them and studying them and measuring them. Then I started running into hand-colored versions, and this was the first hand-colored version I saw. This was the German edition, which is at UNC Chapel Hill, and then I saw a French version at Johns Hopkins, and another French version at Houghton Library at Harvard, and then I encountered the Latin edition at Brown University. And although the colors are dimmer here, there is something, then the Mariners Museum. There's something unique about the Grand Voyages at the John Hay Library at Brown, not the John Carter Brown Library, which is at Brown, but the John Hay Library, which is the university library. But they had 6 volumes that looked just like this, beautifully packaged. They probably hadn't been opened by hardly anybody. And when I started looking at them, the copy on top was a Harriet. Whoops. And after I finished going through all of them, the stack looked like this because I was so excited. I told the curator that I was not going to stop until I got these published. And so the book that was published last year by Taschen contains the engravings from these books, hand-colored. Variations of color. Best way to talk about this is to look at the John White drawings and what happened to them when they went from his drawings, which the engraver saw, but the hand colorist did not see. So when the engraver started, the engraver had this image of this woman and her daughter. And John White says a wife of an important person and her 8-year-old daughter. And so this little guy is sitting here engraving and looking, and in order to engrave, he has to do a copper plate like this, which is a mirror image, so that when you turn this over and print it, you get this. So this tree is over here, and this tree is over here, and it's a reversed mirror image, which takes some practice to do something like that. I mean, a lot of practice. And so anyway, this is the engraving. I mean, this is John White's drawing. This is the engraving. This girl might be 8, but this girl is not 8. But anyway, then the other thing that the engraver did, you may recall if you've seen a Harriet book, is the engraver not only did the front of people, but the engraver also did their backs. And John White did not draw the backs, but the engraver creatively figured out what the back should look like of all of these people. So here is a hand-colored version, which is unbelievable because you not only get beautiful colors on the mother, and you get this doll, it's an English doll, held by the little girl, but if you go back now, the little girl is not holding this, whatever it is. She's just holding a little doll. So the engraver got sort of creative. And not only that, the engraver, if you look at all the John White drawings, there is no background. I mean, where's the land? These people are standing in space. But in the engravings, all of a sudden, there's a landscape. And the engraver had no landscape in John White drawings. And so the engraver created landscapes. And then when the colorists started coloring, the colorists were most experienced in hand coloring Japanese landscapes, and so the landscape starts looking like a Japanese landscape and not an American landscape. So here's the John White drawing and the colored version. This is an English version of the engraving. Whoa. Anyway, this one was the hand coloring on this was on this English version was supervised by William Strachey, who you may recall was one of the leaders at Jamestown. This is my favorite, you know, the sitting at meat, the man and the woman, and there's no fish, there's no corn, there's no nothing in there. And so the engraver got really creative and started putting all kinds of things around, including the tobacco pouch and all that. So anyway, then the hand colorist comes in and gets very creative again. This is the people sitting at meat and the man and woman again. This is the English version. Evidently, the memo didn't get out to the English colors that the corn was red, white, and blue. However, after I got to know a lot more about Indians, I concluded that actually, when William Strachey called for the colors on this, he was probably right, because this is the other season's corn. This is flour corn. This is not what they called sweet corn. So color of maps, we talked a little bit about this already. The map colorists help us to understand. Here's Florida. One of the things the map colorists do is they can't stand not having boundaries. So whenever they color something, they put boundaries in, even when they have no idea what is behind the boundaries. But Europeans just love to have boundaries, and so whether it's North America, Central America, or South America, they just had to create boundaries that didn't really exist. So anyway, 10 years later, I got my book, and I'm very happy with it. Just a final couple of things. There are 9 volumes in here. The first 6 volumes are hand-colored using the hand-colored copies from the Brown University copy, the John Hay Library copy. The last 3 copies are in black and white. We have found no hand-colored versions of those, and actually there's no reason why they should have been hand-colored. But I wanted to mention number 8 here, which is described as the Caribbean. And this is very important because volume 8 includes the exploits of the English explorers. And so it includes engravings relating to Thomas Cavendish, to Humphrey Gilbert, to Drake, and to Raleigh. And so in volume 8, you get information about and engravings of another journey that Raleigh took in 1585, when he went to what is now Venezuela and Colombia and Guyana. It was called Guyana at the time, and to study the Orinoco River, which just happens to be the 4th largest river in the world. We know the Amazon, we know the Mississippi, but we don't usually think of the Orinoco. We know the Nile, of course, but the Orinoco is number 4 after those rivers, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I said it, but, and you can quote me, but say that I said don't quote me. But in any case, the Orinoco, and of course Raleigh's purpose was, he didn't find gold in North America, but he was absolutely convinced that there was unfound gold in South America, and he could find El Dorado in South America. And so he organized in 1595 this expedition, and this is Raleigh in charge of everything. He didn't make it to North America, but he got to South America 2 times, and this is Raleigh invading and capturing Trinidad, which is really right at the mouth of the Orinoco River, or offshore. And then he wanted to go up the Orinoco River because he felt that El Dorado was up the river. And so he persuaded one of the Indian chiefs, Indian king of, in the book it says, Oromaya, to help him go up the river. 1595 was a little bit less bloody than his next trip, which was in 1518, before he was executed. And so here he's befriending the chief, And this is where he wanted to get to, is he believed that up the Orinoco River, he was going to find these, in the book it says Guyanese, people making golden statues. They had nothing better to do with all the gold except to just make statues out of gold, and that's where he wanted to get to. But I wanted to bring your attention to one other engraving in this book that sort of puts us all to shame in North Carolina and Virginia, because we like to say that the first English settlement and claim of land was in Virginia. But lo and behold, in this book, it says Francis Drake claimed title to Nova Albion, which is at San Francisco or near San Francisco in California, for England on 17 June 1579. You know, people in California, they just want to get all of the glory, I guess. But in any case, the book occurred, and wanted to mention it in conclusion that a colleague of mine from the Franklin Institute and I organized a trip to Sir Walter Raleigh's Ireland and England for this coming October. And we have obviously, for good COVID reasons, cogent COVID reasons, decided to postpone the trip until October 2021. And that will give us the opportunity to make it a historical journey of Sir Walter Raleigh and Thomas Harriot's Ireland and England, because actually the two men were almost inseparable, except when Thomas Harriot came to Virginia throughout their lives. Thomas Harriot was always there as a scientist and assistant to Sir Walter Raleigh. So if you're not doing anything next October, and if COVID-19 allows us, you might want to think about going on this trip. The website to go to is sirwalterraleigh.org. So anyway, I have a lot more to say, but I'll conclude right there so we can answer some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tise. That was fascinating. It was a really nice presentation. I have a few questions, and I think some more are coming in as we go. So I will start with, in no particular order, how did the average citizen become aware of the explorations around the globe? A pictorial book such as DeBry's wasn't available to the masses.
Probably the common people on the street knew more about what was going on than anybody else did, because in the 16th century, 1 out of every 4 or 5 people had something to do with sailing or shipping or cargoes or something, and there were daily postings of ships coming and going, downloading ships. There were sailors who just arrived, and sailors drank and talked, and you know, there were postings around and word of mouth. I would say that probably the common people, even though they didn't see these books that we're talking about, they knew more about what was going on than in the other parts of the world than sometimes we do today. The word of mouth and just talking was just unbelievable. As you know from Atlantic Studies, which we've been going through a spate of that concept over the last 20 or 25 years, sailors got everywhere in the world, and they talked and they carried artifacts and diseases everywhere they went, and they never stopped talking about their exploits. And oh yeah, I was on that Roanoke, you know, when we were attacked by the French. Oh yeah, I can tell you all about it. It was a bloody mess. But anyway, yeah, what was going on in the world was well known by people in every country.
Okay, great. And that question was from Duncan Payne. Sorry, I'm trying to read people's names as they go. This question is from Patricia Schaffenberg. And her question is, are the ships drawn on the maps merely decorative, or do they convey important information?
That's a very interesting question. We had a conference at East Carolina a few years ago. East Carolina has a big maritime studies program, and we brought in a number of people who were French, German, English people who studied ships, and we assumed, or I assumed, and I think others did too, that the ships in those pictures were just sort of they were decorative, they were made up, and but lo and behold, like I showed you the picture of the temporary fortification in Puerto Rico where they built the new pinnace. Well, at the bottom of that picture, there's a ship, and these French and German and these maritime people studied that ship over and over and over. They decided it is real. It is real. So I think some of the ships, particularly, I mean, one of the things I didn't go into is that in some of the later books in the Theodore DeBry set, there are many images of ships, and a lot of those ships are for real. But also, you know, almost every city, whether you're talking about London or waterways in Europe, there were ships sitting out that engravers could just look out and see a ship right there. So they were based on real ships, but whether they were in all cases ships representing what was on these trips, there's take a lot of debate on that. So some of them are pretty faithful, yeah.
All right, thank you. This question is from, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering anybody's name, Evie Toronto. Her question is, besides Jefferson, do we have any other specifics of the patrons of these books? How about the cost of these books? Also, can you suggest how these images can be used to discuss European perceptions of otherness at this time of exploration?
Wow. Okay. First part is who bought the books. I've checked libraries of a lot of collectors a lot of people who had book collections in the 18th century, and other people checked too. And I don't think we found anybody besides Jefferson who had these books in the 18th century. But in the 19th century, as I mentioned, there were book dealers who were ripping off every library in Europe, and basically when the market revolution occurred in the United States in the 1820s and 1830s, people like Henry Stevens, who was from Vermont, set up a shop in London, right on Trafalgar Square, and started collecting these books and selling them to rich people in America. So, but you know, like the Chinese buy all the treasures, Chinese and Japanese buy all the treasures today. After the War of 1812 in the United States, up until the 20th century, the people with the big bucks who were buying all these books were Americans, and so the big infusion of these books occurred in the 19th century, before the Civil War, and then again in the 1870s to 1900, and then after the Second World War, many libraries were broken up in Europe, and that's when many of the copies, like the book, the set that I discussed from Brown University, they were from a bombed out or discontinued abbey outside of Vienna in Austria, and so the really and truly, a large majority of the hand-colored books now are in the United States. And after the United States, the second largest gathering of hand-colored books are in Netherlands. There are lots in Netherlands that still have not been seen. There are some that I have tried to see, but for one reason or another, the owners or the dealers didn't always want to share my analysis of their books. Okay, and the second part of the question is, can we understand, yes, the implications for attitudes? One thing that is really striking about the set of books is that John White was on the coast of Virginia, North Carolina, before the fireworks started. You may recall that the exploration trip of Ralph Lane, which Thomas Harriot and John White were on, before it was all over with, became really bloody. And so all of the it's one reason why I believe that the John White was only there for a short period of time, because all of his images of the Indians on the coast are almost adorations, and they are very, very realistic. And there's no emphasis about warfare or anything. You go from volume 1, which is the Harriet DeBry book, to number 2, which is the French in Florida, and there's nothing but blood. You go to volume 3, which is Brazil, nothing but blood. And so John White, poor guy, I mean, he just didn't get exposed, so that when he went back with Raleigh's third colony, I don't think he had been back since he was there drawing those images. And what he found in 1587 was a different world from what he experienced briefly in 1585. So if you go beyond the first volume, the study of what Europeans did to Indians, which was conquest, which was enslavement, and what Europeans got Indians to do to other Indians, which was to capture other Indians and sell them to Europeans as slaves, slaves to serve Europeans or to be shipped to the West Indies. I mean, we've just begun to understand the extent to which American settlers, English settlers in North America, captured Indians and sold them into the West Indies. Well, that happened it was happening before the English came to America. The Spaniards were doing that. I mean, the Spaniards killed almost all the Indians in the West Indies, so they had to go to South America to get Indians to repopulate people in Cuba and Haiti and not Haiti, Santo Domingo, to do the work. And so we're really just beginning the extent to which Europeans ravaged. So yes, you can look at those other volumes and understand a heap about the conspiracies and the bad behavior of Europeans.
All right, thank you. Just a few more questions. This one's from Charles Brett. To go off of that, were these maps collected for the art or the information they contain?
Could you state that again? I think I missed the first part of it.
Yeah, the question is, were these maps collected for the art or for the information they contain?
Well, if you read the correspondence of the collectors in the 19th century, uh, it was almost like they were papering their libraries. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I don't think John Carter Brown read the books in his library, but he wanted to have a beautiful library, and I'm not sure that James Lennox, who put together the library, which became the New York Public Library, who bought loads and loads and loads of these books and maps. I'm sure they put the maps on the walls as both decoration and as trophies. But the libraries they put together were almost gentlemen's trophies. And unfortunately, as long as they were in those private libraries, they really couldn't be studied. Well, let me tell you one other thing that blows most people's minds. From the time uh, um, John White did his watercolors in 1585, 89 until 1984, nobody had seen the John White drawings unless they visited the British Library or former British Museum. It was not until 1984 that the British Library, or then it was the British Museum, allowed copies to be made. And so Americans, I mean, if you read the illustrations of the Indians that were included in textbooks and in travelers' books and so on, they'll say, this is an authentic book with John White's original drawings. And you can go through books in Virginia and North Carolina, textbooks and so on, and they're not John White's drawings. They're these engravings. And so there's not much available to be studied. And I mean, anyway, I don't think much study occurred until the second half of the 20th century. I mean, these things, you know, like the copies of the 6 volumes at the John Carter Brown Library. I mean, when I went there the first time in 2009 or 2010, whatever it was, the curator said, we've only had one request for this since 1945 when it came, or 55 when it came into the library. So no, they weren't studied. We're just now, I mean, there's just a wonderful outpouring of books with people studying these in detail. And they're studying them for art, for history, for anthropology, for decoration, particularly the bodily decoration, the tattoos, it's a goldmine of resources. You can tell I like what I study.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we. I'm going to combine these two questions because I think they kind of go into each other. So this is from both William Balderson and Elion Dodson. And the first part is, in which of the original manuscripts were the colors best preserved? And then what do you believe are the reasons that there aren't any surviving colored examples of volumes 7 through 9?
Okay. Well, if you think about it, the main things that were hand colored in the 16th and 17th century were maps, were prints, and books. If you hang up a map, it's going to lose its color because of exposure to light, sunlight. If you hang up a print, so that you can enjoy it. The color is going to go away. Just sunlight, exposure, and so on. If you hand color a book and you slam that book and it's not open for 100 years, you're going to have the original color. So the color is preserved in almost all of those copies. The color is extremely faithful. The only areas where you lose things is that they used gold and silver in hand coloring. A lot of these books have loads of gold and loads of silver in them. The gold is gold still. The silver is black because it did tarnish. And so it's very hard to figure out when you look at some of these whether it's silver or whether it's black. But fortunately, in some of the cases, like those books at Brown, which have almost never been opened, you can still see silver in them, which is just it's just unbelievable. So if you want to preserve color, don't make maps and don't hang up maps and don't make prints and hang up prints. Put them in a book, and the color is very faithful. Now the colors, I have to say, in just to mention a couple of examples, the Mariners Museum Latin copy, the colors in there are exceedingly bright, exceedingly beautiful, exceedingly luminous, and in other versions there is less luminosity to the engravings. Or to the hand-colored books. But got me so excited here, I lost my train of thought. Repeat the question again.
The second part was why do you believe what do you believe are the reasons there aren't any surviving colored examples of volumes 7 through 9?
Well, I think the reason why, I mean, I have had discussions with this with people who really know the Harriet DeBry stuff, and so the first 6 volumes, I mean the first 6 volumes were published between 1590 and 1596, I believe. 1590 and 1596. I maybe 1 year. I may be off 1 year. So you had volumes coming out almost every year, and people were collecting them. Then the next, that volume 8 that I talked about, where Raleigh went to South America, the English people, that didn't come out until 1599, and then the next one came out in 1602, and then the next one after that was not until like 1608 or 1609, and so you talk about 20 years later. If somebody was collecting them, they might not have continued to collect them. Plus, I mean, that's one reason. Another reason is that after a certain number of volumes, trying to think at what point, the Theodore DeBry died, I think 1595, something like that, and so his sons took over the business, and the quality started changing. It was just the 13th or 14th volume was not published until 1634. So there's not much reason why you would go color them.
All right. One last question. This is from John Piasecki, who thinks it's a wonderful presentation of fascinating history. He wants to know how someone can buy your book.
Well, you can go to the Taschen site. You know, Taschen is one of the biggest publishers of art. It's just unbelievable what they publish, and the quality of their work is just astonishing. When I first started talking with them about doing this book, they said, "Oh, we're going to make a collector's edition." And I said, "What does that mean?" They said, "Well, it's going to be probably minimum 500. And if we make an exclusive collector's edition, it'd be 1,200." And so the more we got into it, the more they got excited about it. And so when it was finally published, and understand it's published in 3 languages, it's in French, English, and German. It's a fabulous book. They priced it at $150. And since Taschen is a retail publisher, you can actually go to places like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and get it for $90. So if you just put in Larry Tise, Tise, and search for my books, you will find them, and you can get a copy for probably about $90 on any bookseller list.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for answering all of everyone's questions. I hope that everybody that joined us tonight enjoyed the presentation. I know I certainly did. If you loved tonight's presentation, which I'm sure you all did, the next 2 parts of this Voorhees lecture for this year, our virtual Voorhees lecture. The first will take place on September 23rd with journalist Andrew Lawler presenting Uncharted Territory, How Maps Launched and Nearly Sank English Colonization of the New World. And then on October 22nd, with the Library of Virginia's senior map archivist, Cassandra Britt Farrell, presenting on 17th century maps of Virginia, Maryland, and the Southeast, 1590 to 1720. So we hope that everyone will be able to join us for both of those presentations as well. Thank you everybody for attending. Again, if you'd like to support the library's work, there is a link in the chat box, or you can go to the library's website and go to support the library. Thank you so much again, and we hope to see you again next month for the next presentation. Thank you again, Dr. Tise.
Thank you.